Okay, good morning. My name is Jennifer Fasciano. I work with net.America, and this morning we're talking to, I'd like to introduce Latifa Durant, who is the Vice President of Innovation at CityWorks DC in Washington, DC. And today we're going to be talking about what does it take to set up a registered apprenticeship program in Washington, DC, and who better to answer some of those questions than a person right on the ground floor of those programs. So welcome.
Great. Good morning, Jennifer. Thank you for having me.
Can you start by telling me a little bit about CityWorks DC and your work there?
Certainly. So again, my name is Latifa Durant, Vice President of Innovation at CityWorks DC. At CityWorks DC, we are committed to providing opportunities for youth of color to earn family-sustaining wages in DC. We do that by working to create an ecosystem in which programs like our CareerWise Youth Apprenticeship Program can thrive. So that means working with employers, working with government leaders, working with higher education and K-12 to make sure that young people have the access to opportunities they need to be successful in life.
That's fantastic. What specifically is your role in making those programs work?
Certainly. So I manage all of our youth-facing programs. So we have both CareerWise, which is our youth apprenticeship program, as well as Embark, which is a program for out-of-school youth. And those are youth who are disconnected from school and from work. And we provide coaching services and academic coaching services to them to be able to set their goals and start making progress in attaining those goals so that they can have the life that they want to lead. Our youth apprenticeship program, CareerWise, starts in high school. And we typically start with 11th graders who are able to work part-time and go to school part-time. And they do that for 3 years with us. So even post-graduation, they're able to work with the employer on a full-time basis. And in addition, we're supporting apprenticeships at Aon Corporation, which is a multinational insurance company. But specifically, we're supporting their apprentices here in Washington, DC, with all the wraparound services. So our role is to make sure that they're successful at school and at home and at work. And so those apprentices are earning their associate's degree from the Community College, University of the District of Columbia. They're working at Aon, and then they also have just life to take care of. And so we're there to make sure that all of it goes smoothly and support them in any areas where they need assistance.
Okay, so for someone that's new to apprenticeships, can you describe from the employer perspective what does it mean to have apprentices at your workplace? And how does that work?
Right, so what it means to have employers at your workplace is that you are willing to train your talent. So I think oftentimes employers or businesses are thought of as consumers of talent. So give the talent to me kind of ready-made and ready to go. But in apprenticeship, you're able to help to develop that talent. So you're able to teach them the ways of your organization, the ways of your industry. You're able to also lay out what we call a training plan that details what that apprentice should know and be able to do over the course of their apprenticeship. And then as they meet those competencies, they're able to really provide a return on investment to your organization. So from an employer's perspective, they are really working on their talent pipeline by hiring an apprentice, ideally in those areas that they find difficult to fill or hard to staff, or in areas that they can honestly train in to make sure that they have the talent that they need for their business.
Okay, that's fantastic. So if I was an employer coming in, how would I get started? Would I just call you up?
No, that's a great question. So as I was sharing, CityWorks DC, we're really committed to providing opportunities for youth of color to earn family sustaining wages. And one of the ways we do that is through registered apprenticeship. And so we are actually a registered apprenticeship sponsor in Washington, DC, both for youth apprentices as well as adult apprentices. So when I think about starting up a registered apprenticeship program, it's really a three-legged stool, so to speak. So you have your employers or business, your participants or apprentices, as well as training. And so you either have to be an employer or have employers ready, of course, to hire apprentices. So that's one piece. You also need to identify individuals who are interested in becoming apprentices. And you also need to know how you're going to train those apprentices on the identified occupations, right? So this isn't like an internship where you can just have someone kind of come in and answer phones or file paper. Like, you have to really think through, how will they get the skill sets they need to be successful in our industry? And that could be provided in-house training. It could be contracting that training out to other organizations. It could be enrolling in a community college course that provides them with the skill sets that they need for the job. So it's those three things that are really needed to get started in your apprenticeship journey.
Okay. So career-wise, as a program, is really the intermediary between all of those facets to get them to work.
Exactly. We are the intermediary to help employers, to help the young people and the training providers all come together in a way to make it successful.
I'll step back one second. So you said a registered apprenticeship program. Can you just, for people that might not know, describe what that registration process is?
Yes. So the registration process may look a little different depending on the jurisdiction that you're in, but for the DC context, to set up a registered apprenticeship program, a business or intermediary organization like ours, we work with the Department of Employment Services, DOES. And they would review and provide you feedback on your apprenticeship standards. And so I definitely recommend connecting with whatever that equivalent organization is in your area. But for us, the DOES has a lot of great staff members who are able to provide you with the support that you need to make sure that your standards are fully developed and understood. And then from there, you have to actually go before the DC Apprenticeship Council. And so the DC Apprenticeship Council is the body that actually has to approve your apprenticeship standards. This process is very similar in other jurisdictions. For example, before working in DC, I worked to set up a registered apprenticeship program in Maryland, and it was a very similar process. I worked with the equivalent Department of Apprenticeships there, or Office of Apprenticeships there. They helped me to develop the standards, review the standards, making sure that they were complete, and that they addressed all the questions that the council might have about our standards. And then I had to, present before the apprenticeship council there. So regardless of your jurisdiction, I would definitely recommend working with whatever Office of Apprenticeship exists where you are, and helping and utilizing them to get through that approval process with the local apprenticeship council.
So the help is out there.
The help is definitely out there.
Great. Can you talk a little bit about, I've heard on some different talks that you've done about what a modern youth apprenticeship is, as opposed to maybe what we think of as a classical apprenticeship program? Yeah.
So most people, when they hear the word apprenticeship, they think adults, first of all. And they also think that it's limited to the construction trades. They often believe that it's for individuals who aren't going to college, right? So at CareerWise DC, we make that distinction that this is a modern youth apprenticeship program. So what does that mean? It means that you don't have to wait until you're an adult. You don't have to be 20 something to start. You can start while you're in high school. It means that it's not only in construction. So we have apprenticeships in IT, business, finance, and hopefully want to expand to healthcare as well. It means that, you do get to go to college. So we offer opportunities for our young people to take debt-free college courses while they're in their apprenticeship through our partnership with Purdue Global University, and other organizations are very similar. So the Aon organization that we're supporting, Aon Corporation, their apprentices are working on their associate's degree, as I mentioned, at UDC. And so, most of our apprentices actually continue their college studies after the apprenticeship, either on a part-time or a full-time basis. So what makes it modern is that it is, not what people would have typically conceived of, or what they typically would have believed, which is you have to wait till you're adult, it's only in the construction area, and you're not going to college. Like, that's not the case. With a modern youth apprenticeship, you can start when you're young, and you can be in a professional field like accounting and business operations and healthcare. And you can also get your college degree while you're in a modern youth apprenticeship program as well.
Okay. Can you talk a little bit about, so looking at that college, which usually costs a lot of money, what are, there's some obvious financial considerations and maybe benefits, I would guess, for the modern youth apprenticeship programs from the youth perspective, especially?
Absolutely, absolutely. So the employers that we work with do help to offset costs of college by paying for courses that are related to the industry that they're working in. And so some of those courses are able to be paid for, and they are able to participate in them debt-free while they are within the program. It also helps them to clearly identify, what it is they want to study. A lot of young people, sometimes lose time or lose credits or really lose money trying to figure out like what they want to study. And so this is a less financially risky way of trying out a particular occupation and trying out particular courses related to that occupation to see if it is a good fit before you fully engage in a full, major of study or what have you. So I think there's definitely financial benefit to the apprentices as the employers are supporting their college coursework while they're in the program, at least in our case. But there's also the benefit of the apprentices getting an opportunity to engage in college coursework as they discover and uncover kind of what their long-term career path is going to be.
What their passions.
Absolutely.
Find their passions, yeah. My next question has to do with what are some of the roadblocks that you've come across in people, either from the employer perspective or student perspective, in setting up apprenticeship programs, and how can we try to avoid some of those?
Certainly. So from an employer perspective, some of the roadblocks are just, this is how we've always done things. They often say, well, we've always hired from these particular schools or these particular universities or use this particular pathway to source our talent. And so the first hurdle I would say with many employers is mindset, and kind of having a mindset shift of, there are different ways that we can source our talent. And so first being open to the fact that there are different ways and different opportunities, and seeing apprenticeship as an opportunity to do that. I would say once you kind of get over the mindset challenge for employers, then sometimes it's the practical or technical challenge of, well, what have we set up? What structures have we created that produce barriers for young people or anyone to access our employment opportunities? And so sometimes that means looking at job descriptions that, maybe previously required a bachelor's degree, and trying to think through, well, does it actually need a bachelor's degree? Or do I need someone that has a certain set of skills to do this job? And so I think as employers are able to shift a mindset from this is the way we've always done it to there's, other ways that we can source our talent. And as they look through, their current practices, and maybe creating barriers to access and entry into their workplace, and revising and changing some of those systems or policies or what have you. And then I would say also, as they begin to think about, how they staff and where they staff, I guess what different sources can they go to, right? So would it be an intermediary that could provide support, or schools that could provide support, or community organizations that could provide support? So kind of rethinking how do they get even the word out about the opportunities that are available. For students, some of the barriers that we've seen are the perception of, oh, well, I don't want to do an apprenticeship because I want to go to college. And so helping them to understand, at least with our modern youth apprenticeship program, career-wise, that they're able to do both. You can go to college and you can do an apprenticeship. Another challenge that young people face sometimes is just student schedules that make it difficult for them to get out of school. And so that's where our role comes in too, as an intermediary, to help young people to advocate for themselves, and working with our school partners to say, okay, like what can we change in its class schedule and their school schedule so that they could, be released earlier so that they can get to work. That's a barrier that many young people face. And so I would say another area that's sometimes a challenge for young people is transportation. And so one of the things we try to do there is find employers that are within a certain radius of their home and school, so that it is feasible for them to get to and from work in a reasonable amount of time.
Okay.
So those are some
A
of
lot
the
of problem
challenges facing our
solving.
young people. Yes, yes, a lot of problem solving. So I feel like that's our job as an intermediary. Like we are the problem solvers, the chief problem solvers for everyone who's engaged in the apprenticeship. So whether that's solving problems and developing solutions for employers to make it work, whether it's solving problems and developing solutions for the apprentice to be able to participate, whether it's solving problems and working with schools, either K-12 or higher education, to figure out how to incorporate work-based learning like apprenticeship more easily into their frameworks. Like we problem solve in that area too. So that's a lot of what we do is
That's why
problem
I love
solving and
your title
collaboration.
as Vice President of Innovation, because everything takes innovation to solve these
It
problems.
does. It does. It does.
So we're getting low on time, but can you talk a little bit more about, or we haven't really talked about it, how to make youth apprenticeships particularly equitable and make sure they're inclusive of all people?
Absolutely. So, at CityWorks DC, we really catalyze change by mobilizing local employers and educators and city leaders to create what we call an equitable talent pipeline for high wage, high demand jobs that includes our young people. I share this because it's important to begin with the end in mind, right? So in the past, people received access to apprenticeships because their uncle or their dad or their cousin referred them, right? And so, in order to create a more equitable pipeline into apprenticeship, businesses would need to take a new approach to recruiting and start recruiting from the community that they're in and the community that they plan to serve. So for instance, CityWorks DC, we're really intentional about recruiting from the city's high schools and from the city's high school graduates. And so if you want your program to reflect diversity, to reflect the community, it's important to recruit your apprentices from the community in which you're located.
Why do you think that's not been the case?
I think it goes back to kind of I said earlier too, like this is the way we've always done it, right? So if you've always, it's sometimes just easier. There's no necessarily like any malice intended. It's like, well, this is how we've always done it. It's easy, it's comfortable. I talk to my current, even in those organizations or occupations that have apprenticeships already in place. It's easy to say, oh, well, refer your friends or your family members, or, we need more apprentices. And so it's easy to just go to the workforce that you have or to go to the typical recruiting strategies that you have. And so it takes, an extra bit of effort. It takes some extra thought to figure out, okay, if I want to be intentional about creating an equitable and an inclusive apprenticeship program, I will need to think differently about this process. And so, for those who don't know where to begin, it's like, I want to be more equitable, but I don't know how to do it. I don't know where to go. What do I do? I would just start where you are. Start with your local schools, either your local high schools, your local community colleges, community nonprofit organizations, where you're located. Boys and Girls Club, YMCA, like just think about who already has access to people and people that represent those that you're trying to attract to your apprenticeship program.
Okay. I love that answer. And I think that we're about out of time, but I think that's a good place to end it. Is there any other final thoughts you have?
I would just say we highly encourage anyone who is listening to this podcast to get involved in apprenticeship. I know I talked a lot about youth apprenticeship, but I said we also do adult apprenticeship. It doesn't have to be youth. To figure out how you can create a new way to source your talent in your organization through apprenticeship. And if you need support in figuring that out, we also do technical assistance to a certain extent for businesses and organizations that are trying to figure this out. And so certainly welcome to reach out to me directly at DURANT at citybridge.org. And I'm sure we'll also have contact listed at the podcast as well, because we're just glad to help anyone and anyone who's interested in learning more and exploring the possibilities of apprenticeship.
Hey, fantastic. And thank you so much for your time. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. Appreciate you having me.